Morning, students, or afternoon. This is Ms. Shofity. We are going to do Chapter 12 Cornell Notes a little bit differently. So this is actually going to be, hopefully, a little bit easier. So we're setting this up as fill in the blank Cornell Notes. As you can see, the due date, um, you don't have you have about a week to get these done, and you have 2 attempts to finish these. But I'm going to kind of walk you through a couple so that you can see. I know this is not the same view that you will get, but it should be pretty similar. So to access this, you're in February 22nd, attendance, warm up, and assignments. And then when you decide to start this, you should also have the tab for our Discovery Ed Tech book open to Chapter 12. So you can see the Discovery Ed Tech book is right here. This is Chapter 12 entitled America's Global Reach. So it really talks about how the United States, was kind of having different relationships with different countries. Section 1 is about imperialism and the Spanish American War. Section 2 is about the United States entering the First World War, also called the Great War. And then Section 3 is about challenges of intervention. So Chapter 12 Cornell Notes are going to take you through all 3 sections. So we'll go ahead and kind of get started with this. So again, this is not the exact same view that you'll get, but it's pretty similar. So I'm going to take you through the preview. So in Chapter 12.1, this is Section 1, Imperialism and the Spanish-American War, Ms. Coffey specifically gives you the page that you can find this information on. So the question at the top of the page is what led to the Spanish-American War. So you will go to Section 1, Imperialism and the Spanish-American War. So you'll click on that. And you'll obviously, for Cornell Notes, we always start with the Explore page. And remember, she gave you the page number, so this is page 3, so we'll go to page 3. So scrolling down, the question is, what led to the Spanish-American War? And then you go back to your Cornell Notes, and the question is, what led to the Spanish-American War? So when you're reading this, Ms. Coffey put in information from that page. Before the country's industrial expansion, the United States followed an isolationist policy. Blank is a national policy that calls for a country to avoid involvement in most foreign affairs. The blank of 1823 explained and supported this policy. It stated that the United States would stay out of European affairs. Several U.S. businesses were interested in blank. About 90% of the sugar produced in Cuba was sold to the United States. Americans also had invested in the Cuban sugar industry. They provided money, machinery, and employees to Cuban factories. By 1894, things had changed. Only 20% of all Cuban sugar mills were still owned by Cubans. Blank was a threat to the economic relationship between Cuba and the United States. Spain introduced more taxes on goods imported to Cuba. It also made Cuban trade with the United States more difficult. In February 1895, Cubans began fighting against Spanish control. So that all comes from this section. So if I scroll down, so you can kind of read, this very first paragraph is basically what I just read to you. So we go back to the fill in the blank, and you get a word bank. And you basically have to put in what is the first blank. Choose from this word bank. What is the second blank? Choose from this word bank. What is the third? Choose from this word bank. And what is the fourth? Choose from the word bank. So I'm not going to put in the answers, but that's where you would kind of what you would do for that question. Question 2, still on section 1, imperialism and the Spanish-American War, but now we change to page 4. What was the outcome of the Spanish-American War? So we go back to our textbook, then we navigate to page 4, and the question that we're answering in the Cornell notes is exactly the same as the question on page 4. What was the outcome of the Spanish-American War? So it gives you good information. And question 2 reads, the blank officially began on April 25th. Blank. The United States was now directly involved in the Cuban War of blank. The Cuban rebels already had been fighting against the Spanish army. They now controlled the countryside. The Spanish had been pushed into urban areas. This made them easy targets for the U.S. military. The war ended soon with a ceasefire on August 12th. Cuba was granted independence from Spain in December 1898. Only 385 U.S. soldiers were killed in battle. About 1,600 soldiers were wounded. U.S. Secretary of State John Hay called the quick and clear victory a splendid little war. U.S. casualties had been low. However, nearly 2,000 soldiers died from blank. Another 1,500 died from typhoid fever. So again, you would go back to the textbook and you would look for the answers to each of these, fill in the blank questions in the Cornell notes, and you would look for them in the page that it says, in this case, page 4. So basically, in the first 2 paragraphs on this page, you would find the information that would help you accurately fill in the blanks on the Cornell notes. So we'll do one more together. Question 3, still in section 1, imperialism and the Spanish-American War, and now we're on pages 4 and 5. What was the Treaty of Paris? Why did anti-imperialists question annexation of the Philippines? All right, so we'll have to go back to our textbook. So a little bit still on page 4. So you would look for your answers a little bit on page 4. And then it also gives us to look at page 5. Why did anti-imperialists question annexation of the Philippines? So let's go back to our Cornell notes. The Spanish-American War led to the Treaty of Paris. The treaty was signed in 1898. It was a peace agreement between Spain and the United States. The United States paid Spain $20 million for the Philippines. Spain surrendered its claim to blank. Spain also agreed to pay Cuban debt of $400 million. The Teller Amendment was passed in April of 1898, when the United States declared war on Spain. It stated that the U.S. would not take control of Cuba at the end of the war. Blank also gave the Western Pacific island of blank and the Caribbean island of blank to the United States. After the Spanish-American War, Spain agreed to give up the Philippines for $20 million. The United States paid this sum in December 1898. President McKinley then found himself in a difficult situation. The U.S. Army and Navy were protecting the Philippines. McKinley was concerned about leaving the Philippines. He feared that another global power would come in and take over. A foreign takeover would erase any economic, religious, or military gains the U.S. had made there. McKinley didn't want to simply leave the Philippines. He sought to blank the territory. This would mean that Filipinos would be subjects of the U.S. government. All right, so you have to go back to the textbook, obviously, looking on pages 4 and 5 for answers that would fill in those blanks correctly. Remember, on all of these, you get a word bank, so that should be pretty helpful. So you will continue doing that for all 15 questions. So you're going, again, back and forth from the fill in the blank Cornell notes to the textbook, looking over each page because Miss Coffee gives you the section. So this one is 12.2, and she gives you the page where you can find the information. So it's very similar to the Cornell notes that we usually do, but your writing is much less, but you're still looking over and reading the information. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick tutorial on that. If you have questions, of course, always ask. You'll have about a week to get these done. And you have 2 attempts. So if you feel like you didn't do very well the first time, you have a second attempt. But if you're using this method of going from the Cornell notes back to the textbook and using back and forth method, you should be able to do fine. All right, have a great day.